Right. This is the number 2 cylinder, and this here is the primer spray probe. It's got little holes in here in this tube so that it actually kind of atomizes the fuel or sprays it out instead of just dumping it in. And this is the number 2 cylinder. This is where those go, is right here. It's just right in the intake port above the intake valve, and sprays in there. And normally, without a primer line in here, you just have a plug in here to seal that off so it doesn't suck air and lean the mixture out on that. So surprisingly enough, these came out pretty easy. Sometimes these can get seized in there in those holes, and you kind of have to use extreme measures to get them out. Same thing with this. This is the fitting for the cylinder head temperature gauge, and that would go right in there in that port right there. Now that's a blind port right there. That just goes right into the casting on the head, and the probe goes in there to pick up the cylinder head temperature. And again, that came out nice and easy. I get those cleaned up, put them in the new cylinders. When I did the initial inspection on this engine, I found a crack here on the baffling on this nose piece on the left side. After I got the cylinders on, then the next step was to start putting the baffling on there. And I put the baffling on the right side. It went on pretty good. So I knew I was going to have to patch this piece in the front. So when I got this far, I started looking at that, and I found that this other side over here was cracked too. A pretty good sized crack in it. So I took that apart. I took the felt off of there and took that up, made a patch for it. This already had a patch, and it was cracked here along this edge here where it's folded up, and it attaches to the crankcase right here with these 2 bolts. This front one was cracked out there, and then this crack was started down here in this corner and was propagating out this way. So I drilled out the old patch that was on there and took a piece of 40 thousandths 2024 and made up a new patch and put on this side over here. That strengthens that up pretty good. I used 40 thousandths because that's got that bolt hole right through it there, and it's got a screw onto that or bear on that surface. And this other side over here, this crack was going back there a little ways. It actually went back farther than I initially thought once I got the dirt and stuff off of it. So I took a piece of 25 thousandths and bent up on the side here and riveted in on there and got that fitted in there pretty good, and that stiffens that up pretty good. That should hold it for a while. But as I was fitting this up in there, I noticed that this front piece here was broken right here on the edge of this cylinder. So this piece here was hanging loose on the front. So I figured I better fix that one too. And I got to looking at that one. It was an old crack that had been cracked out previously, and they'd been patched in there with a patch back here on the back. I went ahead and took that patch off and laid out a new one to match that one, and I made that out of 20 thousandths. But that mounts up to this cylinder right here with a screw. A bolt goes right in there too. That had already cracked out once right here, so I went ahead and made another patch out of 40 thousandths 2024, and I sandwiched everything together. That should fix that up pretty good. Well, now I got to go find some rivets and put this felt back on here, and then this baffling will be done. Now the engine's coming together. I got these drain tubes in for the crankcase, or for the rocker boxes, and I got the intake tubes in, all new gaskets and bolts. The bolts that came out of those old cylinders were pretty crungy, so I had them send me new bolts. The only thing left to put on here now is the exhaust system. I've got a little bit of work to do to it to clean it up. One of the things that watch out for on here, guys in the shop when they're building an engine, they never think about this, but some of these orientation of some of these fasteners, if you put it in there right when you're putting it together, it makes it a whole lot easier to work on out in the field, especially if you just got to change one cylinder or something out there bouncing around on a float or out on a gravel bar in a windstorm or something like that. It's real nice to have these things a little handier to get to. One of the things that they don't pay much attention to is these hose clamps right here. There's a hose clamp in here. So there's a hose section here that connects this intake system that's in the sump to the intake tube that runs up to the cylinder, and that has hose clamps on it. And that's one of the things you have to take off if you're going to remove a cylinder. And a lot of times the guys on the bench in the shop, They just put them on there willy-nilly because they can get to them real easy. But when you're trying to get into those things, fighting around the exhaust system and everything else, it pays to have them oriented and think about it ahead of time. So you can get a wrench in there, get the nut driver in there or something to get on those, a screwdriver or whatever to get on those, to get them loosened up when you want to take them off. The ones that are really bad are these tubes that go up in here that drain the oil out of the rocker box covers. They're small and they're up in there in a tight spot, and guys always put those in the easiest way possible when it's sitting on the bench, and it's always the worst possible way to get it out when you're out in the field. Anyway, that stuff's coming right along slowly. That's my style, slow. When I took those cylinders apart, I noticed that there was a bunch of the crap that came out of them, the carbon and stuff, granules that came down into these intake tubes. So I took those off to clean them out, and I wanted to clean out all of that intake that goes through the sump here. The intake comes out in kind of a spider, a distributor block or whatever through that sump. I wanted to clean it out, and I was afraid maybe some of that crap had got down in the carburetor. So I pulled the carburetor off, and sure enough, some of it had got down in that. So I cleaned it out and got the crap out of it. But I noticed that this air box here, this carburetor heat air box down here, was rusting up pretty good here, around this and around these openings and stuff. It was pitted and pretty rusty, so I'd taken it off and started sandblasting it to clean it up, powder coated it. I had to spend the day yesterday cleaning up the shop so I could hook up my big oven that I made for powder coating the instrument panel and the torque tube. And I needed to powder coat those water rudders. They wouldn't quite fit in the little oven, the kitchen range oven that I was using. Well, anyway, I got it all going and got this thing powder coated. I powder coated it with some corrosion resistant primer first, and then some high temperature black. There was another piece there as a brace for the exhaust system. I just got the carburetor back on there. Well, now we can get it hooked up